Solange Moujan joins me on the set to take a closer look at what the papers have been saying today. Hi, Solange.
Hi, Jeannie.
You are starting off with some cartoons about this second wave of coronavirus in Europe.
Yeah, it's a Friday, so this was sort of my way of trying to be a little light today on this Friday, even though there are real worries that this virus is creating. Let's begin with L'Opinion's cartoonist CAC. In regard to the new restrictions and Emmanuel Macron saying that citizens need to avoid being in groups of more than 6, he drew the 7 dwarfs of Snow White, with the dwarf doc saying, uh-oh, we have a problem. Now to Switzerland. Here the cartoonist Herman discusses the 9 p.m. curfew in Paris and in other major French cities. For Le Tribune de Genève, Herman imagines Swiss leaders asking if they too would apply such rules, with the president of Switzerland joking that the Swiss would never accept having to go to bed later than 8 p.m. Now to the United Kingdom. As the cartoonist Christian Adams illustrates, London and other major cities are moving to the second tier of a 3-level system. Now, this sets up a max 6-person rule for gatherings outside, and it prohibits as well all social gatherings indoors. A tightening of restrictions or a leveling up that means for Bob Moran of The Telegraph that things are pretty grim in Britain's capital as well.
Certainly are. Solange, you also found another cartoon for us. This one about that canceled U.S. presidential debate that went ahead as 2 town halls last night.
Yeah, the second debate was supposed to happen with Donald Trump and Joe Biden in the same space, but Donald Trump canceled. Instead, he held, as you said, his own town hall meeting while Joe Biden showed up to the original Q&A. And as Bill Bram of the New York Daily News illustrates, this same time, 2 different channel situation created a quandary for voters of who to watch. And it has also created a bit of backlash at NBC for granting Trump the competitive time slot. Nevertheless, Trump was true to form, according to the Washington Post, with a string of false claims, as well as the surprise that the president refused to condemn the conspiracy theory group QAnon. Now, this despite the fact that the FBI has called QAnon, a domestic terrorist threat.
Now, the FBI isn't the only organization that's worried about QAnon.
Well, what Trump won't do, social media outlets are at least trying to do, according to the Financial Times. Now, the paper explains that YouTube has followed in the footsteps of Facebook and Twitter in taking down baseless conspiracy theories that say that Democrats, for example, are part of a satanic pedophile cult. And QAnon isn't the only area where social media giants are sort of starting to pay attention. Politico tells us that Trump's campaign has complained and threatened a lawsuit that Twitter blocked Trump's account briefly over his posting unproven allegations about Joe Biden's son, a sign, at least, that social media is trying to find a path through all of this sort of misleading news.
Solange, there's been a lot of focus on the situation in Thailand as well, where mass protests continue despite the government having declared a national emergency.
Yeah, and as the Bangkok Post shows us, Thais defied the ban of gatherings of 4 or more people. Instead, they flocked to the streets by the thousands to continue their calls for the prime minister to resign and for reforms to the monarchy. Now, The Guardian says that in regard to democracy, Thai citizens have, quote, long been democracy hungry, end quote, but that what's groundbreaking now, according to The Guardian, is this criticism of the monarchy. Being even remotely critical of the king has always been unheard of and even blasphemous. But the movement and as well the king's behavior, his persona, his temporary residency in Germany, have opened up the door, The Guardian says, for, quote, an end of deference. But the strength of the movement doesn't mean there won't be and hasn't been pushback. Human Rights Watch warns that, quote, this quote-unquote state of emergency is instead a pretext for a crackdown.
Now, Solange, something completely different, perhaps the weirdest story of the day out of Brazil.
Yeah, it's coming out of Brazil, but I should probably say it's coming rather from the underpants, yes, the underpants of a Brazilian senator. As O Estado de Sao Paulo tells us, one of Jair Bolsonaro's allies has been caught potentially misappropriating COVID-19 funds. The paper says that the deputy leader of the Senate was caught with cash worth over 4,000 euros in inside his underpants. Yes, his underpants, as police were searching his home. And adding to the embarrassment, the police said that there were feces, yes, this is gross, were on the bills. And the paper not only says the incident is not only, quote, a stain on the president's anti-corruption campaign, but it has also created a story the Brazilian papers say that will remain in the annals of history. And it has created a new viral hashtag in the country, Propina na Banda, which translates as a bribe up the bum.
I just can't even imagine what that would look like with all that cash in your underwear. Okay, Solange, just to wrap up now, another corruption story, slightly more tasteful.
Yes, yes. Rather delicious, I would say. As Forbes tells us, Italian police have nabbed 4,000 bottles of fake Tuscan wine. Now, these super Tuscans, the real ones, go for normally about 400 euros a bottle. And the site tells us that police, through a sophisticated year-long probe that spanned different countries, they found out that the wine in these bottles was actually fake, or not what it said it was. So Forbes concludes that if ever you, as a wine drinker, see this beautiful bottle of vino at 70% less than its normal price, that you might need to be a little skeptical of that.
Good to know. Thank you for that, Solange Moujon, with today's press review. Thanks to you for watching France 24. That wraps it up for me this hour.